Okay, this is Howard Hodges speaking. I'm the son, the oldest son of the woman we're going to interview. And the videographer is Hao Junlu from China. He's my surrogate Chinese son. And I'm going to talk to Harriet Hodges, my mother, in Jacksonville, Florida, at her home at age 97. Okay, Mother, what year were you born?
1917.
Tell me a little bit about growing up in New York.
When I was young, oh well, my father was in the restaurant business, so life was sort of easy for us and time for lots of sports. And after the Olympics were there in 1917, the town where I lived in was quite famous because of the Olympics, at which time I was quite young, 13, 14.
Okay, I remember you mentioned working in the restaurant, and I think the Olympics, by the way, might have been 1932.
Pardon me?
The Olympics were in 1932, I believe.
Yes, but I was only about 13 when the Olympics were on.
Tell me about working in your grandfather's restaurant. One of the stories I remember hearing as a young boy was you were able to memorize and say all the sodas that you used to have outside the restaurant.
All of the what?
All the sodas.
Oh, you mean the ice cream sodas?
No, the sodas you would drink.
Oh, that was a little sort of a side thing near the parking area, which sold cold drinks and candies and small items. And they needed somebody out there to collect for the drink and also to tell them the menu a little bit. So I used to do that for my father, and they would come and ask us what cold drinks, that's all some of them would want, instead of having a restaurant service. So I used to get a lot of fun because I learned them by heart, and I'd tell them to them, and they would stare at me, not probably realizing what I'd said, because I used to go orange, lime, lemon, root beer, birch beer, ginger ale, sarsaparilla, Coca-Cola, cherry, grape. And then they'd stand and look at me, wanting know what I was talking about.
And
but it was fun, and Daddy always used to give me a little extra spending money.
And after you left Au Sable Forks, I know you went to, I believe it was New York City. Tell me about your experience in New York City.
Oh, well, my experience when I first went to New York City, I was quite young. And the other day I couldn't think of the name of this school I went to. That was
Alveda, wasn't it?
Pardon me?
Alveda?
What?
Alveda? Al something.
Yeah, but it was a school where a famous actor was there managing it. Now I have to think about it. Are you thinking Alvini School?
Yes.
Well, yeah, but this other place that was nothing compared to the first place I was, because when I was young, my father, I had a friend whose father used to take her once a week to Plattsburgh, New York, which was about 35 miles from where I lived. And she was my best grade school fan. So we would go there, and it was always on a Monday. And she took cello lessons, and I took dancing lessons and some acrobatic dancing with it. So that was one thing that got me very interested in dancing. And I was in New York later on having an interview with people involved in that sort of work, advanced dancing better. And I cannot think of the school right now. It was a man's name, and which made it quite famous. And Dad and Mother came down to New York to see me, you know, because that was important, that I was chosen for one of the, there were about 3 or 4 parts that were considered the best, you know, for the students that were working there. So after that, I was seen by somebody that wanted to, to talk if I would like to be an understudy for a woman that was in a play that was going to be on Broadway. Now, what they meant by that was that I would learn her parts, and in case she couldn't show up, would I be interested in trying to do it? I'd have to go and, you know, learn by watching. And I keep trying to think of her name, and all I can think of is Anne. You know, if you'd asked me this 15 years ago, I could have thought of it. Anyhow, so I did, and I said I'd be willing to try it. And then after I got out, and I met the person that was involved in the show, and he tried to explain to me what I would be doing as an understudy, that there would be long times I would be without work and this and that. And so I finally decided, and so, but he said my recommendation is, unless you know that you can go long times, maybe with no work, you might not be interested in trying for the job because it's a lot of work on your part. So I thought about it, and then I decided, a girl I was friendly with said to me, why don't you come to, now comes in your Alvini school. I think, wasn't this a school for secretaries and things?
Right.
Okay, then that's Alvini. The other one was not the one I went to and was in the play. All right. I can't go on for all those years and tell you what I did.
Whatever little bits and pieces, what you remember. Okay.
Well, anyhow, I went to this school, which was a school that was very famous by some men that started. It was like a secretarial school. When you graduate from that, you got a job immediately. So I decided to do that instead of trying to. So I went to that school, and if I can think of the name, it's very famous, and I think they still have it and are doing it. In fact, that's when some famous president's wife came there and selected, after interviewing the girls, which girl is her private secretary. Then that's what made me decide that was a good school. So I went to it. And when I graduated, I was offered a job on a firm on Wall Street. I can't think of the man, he was so wonderful. From there, all I can did is after a while I became the top in their secretaries and traveled with him and another man on their things. They were stockbrokers and things like that they sold. And I traveled with it. And then after that, it was not difficult for giving me, I'm trying to think of the names of the schools. And they were so famous at that time.
Okay, well, how about is that when you went to New York? That's when you went from New York City to Washington, D.C.?
No.
At New York City.
I was in Washington, and also later on, I took a job in D.C., which was a higher up job, you know, but doing the same kind of work. And then
at some point in time, you went down to Florida or hired as a job at the University of Florida. Where you met your husband.
That was not hired a job down there. I was working in Washington, and I got leave to go to Florida, and that was where, in Gainesville, I think was the place, that they were interviewing soldiers, interviewing men to become officers, those that they thought could become. And my sister, whose husband was an officer in the Air Force, were stationed there at that time. So I stopped to see her on our way to Fort Pierce to see my son. I forgot how I went. Anyhow, I was there, and I visited my sister, and she was having a dinner. And during the dinner, the head man was interviewing these people to become soldiers in the Army or Air Force or whichever one it was, said something about they were very upset because the girl that did the secretarial work became ill or had an accident. I don't remember the real reason, and had to go and get some care. So they were looking for a secretary desperately. So my sister, who always talks a lot, said, "Oh, my sister's here and she's on a vacation. She could help you." And she told her the name of the company I was working for. And he said, "Oh, that would save my life." So he asked for the name. He called up my boss, and whatever happened, my Mr. Griffin, I think was his name. He said, well, that would be all right for a few days because I was on vacation. Well, I started and doing it, they kept extending it, and I had to report to a certain officer by the name of Hodges. So I would go in, and he was very nice and very polite, and they were having one night for officers that had been selected, a party and a dance. So he invited me. And that's how I met my husband my wonderful husband of many years. I don't know, I cannot know how to make it. I can't remember. Don't forget, I'm 97, it's not that easy for me to remember.
Okay, well, after
70 years ago.
okay, well, tell us after you met him and you got married. You remember where you went? I know you went to what, El Paso, Texas, I think it was, and then at one point in time you went to Germany.
Oh, well, after we were, well, it wasn't right away, because I worked afterwards. I had to go back to my regular job, and he contacted me and Carol Hodges, and would come back and forth into where I was working, into the city. And that is the way, that's how I met my husband, actually. And I did some paperwork for them, and when I left, then he took me to the airplane to leave to go back to where I came from. He handed me a book to read. And, you know, I can't remember the name of the book. But it was something about the military and how people had met and what it had met to brought in their lives, so many things. And he had special pages for me to read. And then he came by at my office where I was working with my regular organization, and I would go out with him, and when I had free time, he would try to make free time to come there, and we went together well over a year before he proposed, and I agreed.
Do you recall the circumstances where you proposed, or was that too long ago?
Well, he proposed after we had left for dinner, and that's when he first said that, started bringing up about life with me and this and that, but that wasn't the time that, you know, I felt maybe I could marry him.
How about when you went to Germany sometime later after you were married? I remember, what was Germany like right after the war when you got there? You remember the circumstances?
Oh, well, I went to Germany when I was wasn't I 46? How old was I?
Well, it was 1946, I think it was, when you went to Germany.
Oh, 1946. Yes, I was there till 1950. I left. That I know, that much. Yes, I was already married.
And what was it like in Germany after the war, after World War II?
Well, Germany was terrible. The people were on the streets, you know, and children were walking around telling they were hungry and holding their hand on their stomach. And when the soldier would throw a cigarette down, the American soldiers, they're going into a movie or something, the German men on the streets would run and grab the cigarette butts. And it was so terrible. There was no mess hall or anything, and all the food came from America. And I'd sit down there with a group of whoever was finished eating lunch or dinner, and because the food came directly from the States. In fact, I tell you what we used to do, and I had pictures, and one with the general. We used to go, anybody that could shoot a certain amount, which I had learned how to do from Daddy, my husband first, Carol Hodges.
Okay, and what was the purpose of the shooting? To shoot animals
Well,
to feed
no,
people?
yes, Dad, well, that's why I was in Korea with Carol, and anyhow, so, the food, I would steal peanut butter and put it on bread and take it out to a child that would be begging for something to eat. So, we were allowed to go hunting in the forest, but we had to have,
A game warden.
pleased. We'd have to have the a German man that would know the forest so that we wouldn't get lost or hurt. So they were very surprised that Dad made me offer to go on a certain thing. Anybody could go, but you had to be with 2 other people, which meant 2 Germans that were, that's what they did. So I went with them and they were laughing, and I could understand enough German at this point that they were laughing that they send a young girl from America that didn't even know Germany to have the opportunity to go hunting to get meat, because we had no way to get meat until they sent it from the States. And when it would come and they'd open up a PX counter for food and whatever you wanted, it would be bought out before unless you hurried. So you never had enough meat. So I signed up because I could shoot well enough to go on a hunting trip. And so I have pictures of me with two Jaegers, they call them, the Germans, and shooting, out hunting with them. And I really killed a deer. And you have to give so much to them to eat, and the rest we'd take home to our maid, and she would cook stew or something with it, because we didn't have meat either at first.
Is that how you got involved with the, tell me about the angel and the Jeep, that story about you in the German papers, the angel and the Jeep, how did that get involved?
Oh, well, that got involved. The angel and the Jeep was, there were a lot of women that ran and went to Czechoslovakia and everything when the war broke out. And then when the Germans, and then after the war slowed down and people were coming back and we were out hunting, and Germany was a mess. And the people came back, and then when they came back, it was, they had no clothes. They had no place to go. And they had been hiding someplace in Czechoslovakia and things. And by that time, I was known a little bit around because I'd had good jobs, and I was married then to an officer, and we were living in Germany then. And we lived in a small town called Starnberg. And I don't know what kind of work Carol did, but it was going to different countries. Anyhow, the women would come, had no place to go. The men that had come back that couldn't go out back in the government and work for the army were in these places, had no clothes to wear. All were in like pajamas and things. Anyhow, and there were people out without things in the countries. So I started with our Officers' Wives Club, and I told them, why don't we try to do things? Well, came out that I'd killed this deer and that I'd given half of the meat to for the soldiers to have, the Korean soldiers.
The Germans.
That were in Germany in the hospital.
The German soldiers, yeah.
Yeah. And then when the women came back from Czechoslovakia, I decided that American wives, there weren't that many of us, form a club and we each serve a little bit of food. And then if we had some clothes we couldn't wear, that we would give them to them. Well, I got a few women started, and then finally there were some people way out that couldn't come in and didn't have food, and I had a Jeep. Daddy had a side and I drove it most of the time, and he drove the car. And so one day some woman was there when and I had written to America and asked the Salvation Army or anybody to send clothes. You know, the people had no clothes, no money to buy them or anything. So I started getting stuff from Salvation Army and some other company that would send me bags of old clothes. And so I would go out in the Jeep in different sections that had asked and written in, and I was, so the one woman that was in the Jeep with me saw how difficult this was not easy, and go to the houses and see the mothers there and then children and everything. Anyhow, she came back and wrote this big story, Angel in Jeep, and told what she had observed on that trip. I didn't know she was with the newspaper. And then I was doing a lot of things through Salvation Army and everything. And then they would and then of course the general found out I was getting a lot of newspaper stuff about Angel and Jeep, so he wanted to talk to me. So we're walking down, I told somebody, and we were walking down the street, and what happened? He saw me coming, and I think I have the gun in my arm still, because I went again with the same two where I had killed the deer. And they were, after it wrote everything, that stuff was written in the newspapers with Angel and Jeep. Then they were willing to sort of help me and tell me to put my arm here on the tree. And coming out, the general heard I had been there and came out, and he wanted to talk to me. And that's how that became famous.
Then at some point afterwards you wound
And
up.
in 1950 we left.
And then you spent some time in the United States during the 50s, I believe, in the real estate business and built houses. You want to talk a little bit about that or any part of that?
Well, when I came back in 1946, I brought my German, the Korean government gave me permission. Huh?
The German government, you mean?
I mean the German government and our government for me to bring Louisa back with me to America to help me for a few years. But she finally, and she lived with me, so I had all day that I didn't have any housework or anything to do. And so they're very close to me. There was an office, like a real estate office, and a builder that built houses.
And this is when you formed Cosmopolitan
No,
Builders?
this is, anyhow, they built houses. So I went in, and I went with them, and the houses they built, trying to sell them. And the name of the real estate company?
Pomponio?
Pomponio, right. Pomponio Real Estate. And I worked for them for several years, and the first thing I happened to sell was an apartment house. And so I can't think of the boss's name. Anyhow, he was so excited that I built that apartment house. So I told him, who is your builder that builds your homes? And he told me, and I said to him, you know what? Why do you build the doors so close? Sometimes you open one door, and if I open the other, you have trouble. And then I would explain why don't you? But he didn't have time. So every time I saw property for sale or something, I would go and just look at it and think about what could be done. And then I became very friendly with one of the men that had worked for him a long time. And I was talking to him about it. And he said, my gosh, you ought to go out and build some houses. I said, if I had the property, or if I was working for a company that was starting building, I'd be interested in trying to invest something in it. So I talked to my dad about it. If he would, maybe loan me some money if I tried to go in a little company. And he said he had to know about it. So I thought, well, and to find somebody that knew something about it. So I was talking to the Pomponio builder, and he said, I know somebody that's interested. That's when I met Pinto. And he was also one of the men that was selling real estate. So I became involved with, after selling enough, the builder was talking, that was working for Pomponio, talked to me, and he said, are you really serious about it? And I said, yes. And he said, I know somebody that would be interested in your going along, and maybe try one house with your ideas. And I finally met him, and his wife was married to a wealthy man, and they decided, but he wanted to get involved. And so she convinced her father, which was that she would give the offices of, she lived in a beautiful house downstairs to her husband, to let him fix office, to try out what he wanted. He wanted to have certain people that knew how to, things about houses and everything. So it was costing me no rent, no time, I didn't have to work. So I thought that'd be interesting to try to build houses and things. After I've seen so many, I'd already worked for about almost 2 years with Pomponio. And when I told him, he said to me, I have to wish you good luck because you pointed out so many things that helped me in the sale of my things I was building. So he was very nice.
I remember one of the things that was unique about the houses you built, and some of the owners, they even written you letters, was that you knew as a woman the kind of kitchens, the kind of bathrooms that should be built, that they were too small or too incorrect, and that a lot of times women were the decision makers in what house was actually bought.
Well, I mean, you know, look at, you don't realize that that is 60 years ago.
I know that's why we're taping this. Okay,
So it's not that easy for me to
Okay.
remember names.
we're not asking for a name, we're asking for just a general outline, okay? So you answered that story. And then at that time you moved to Japan. Why don't you talk a little bit about your experience in Japan?
Well, Japan was after we were transferred out of Germany and home.
Right? Well, tell about your time
Well,
in Japan.
that was after.
Right, we know that.
Oh, well, it was. See, I'd already built houses, and we had one house, big house, that hadn't been for sold. And anyhow, the man that went into business, his wife was nice and everything wonderful to me. But the thing that bothered me was he was always late for the jobs and always not on time. And when it would be Sunday and it's his turn to sit on the certain houses, he'd say, oh, I'm sick, or I'll be late, would you go in ahead? And then he wouldn't show up and things like that. So I was sick of it. And we had one house that we had for sale. And I said, you tell me, you buy the house and I'll name the price, or you name the price and I'll decide. Whichever you want. He said, I want to buy the house. I'll buy it and sell it. I said, okay, but we're coming on a price. So he kept the house and he signed the paper that he took it, and we went to Japan.
I talked to him later on. He said that after you left, a short period of time afterwards, he went out of business because he said you were the real business person of all the houses that you
Well,
sold. But so let's talk about your time in Japan. Tell me about your experience in Japan.
I cannot think. I'm tired.
Okay.
In Japan, I mean,
I know you won an international bridge.
That was just playing in the women's club. And not only that, I was associated with Japanese. What we did was some Japanese would be getting ready to go to America, and we would. Well, first thing that started was we were invited to a dinner party. And when the party was very nice and nice people were saying goodbye and standing in line and talking. And afterwards I looked, and this one man was so-and-so, and he was walking out with a woman that was another woman. And I turned around my husband, I said, look at that. Do you think they date each other's wives or something? Because I didn't know anything then. I was new. Because their name, they would call him by one name and she was another. But it was just whatever it was mixed up, you know. But so I started by thinking, I don't want to bother with Japanese stuff. Then I joined the clubs there because bridge, which I liked. And I met a lot of women I became friends with. Then we were asked one time people that were from America, when wives, officers' wives they wanted, would come to a meeting of some kind. So then they asked, that's when they would ask if we would invite like 4 men or some men. We could use the officers' club or our homes or whatever and teach them, because they were going to be the officers that went on duty to the United States. So we'd have them to the house and just for a while show them what the simple things like pulling the chair out and seating the ladies, and then that took up time. And of course there were
Yeah, and that was a time, of course, when your husband was involved in the preparation for the Tokyo Olympics. But one of my favorite stories about your time in Japan was when you played in some international bridge tournament, which involved Japan and China.
Oh no, it wasn't. Well, there were from all over the world were invited. Like in America, you have them. The bridge. It's duplicate bridge, not like ordinary bridge. And they came from all over. We had people from Japan, from America, from China, from France, from all over. And there was one couple that it was a Chinese couple. And so you started playing, and it depended. You had to play so many tables, and there were not 10 tables or 20 tables. There would be 100 or maybe more. And then at the end of the first game, there would be so many that would be knocked out. The ones that they could, the first game, not the first tournament, the first day of the tournament. And you got to play with, like, if I beat you, then I would turn around and you would be put down. I don't know if sometimes they had 3 times, you were beaten 3 times, you were out.
It was an elimination tournament.
Yeah, left. So of course everybody's hanging around because they're betting. So the Chinese man from the table came over and he looked at me and he said, "You know, ma'am, I wish you good luck. And if you should win," no, he didn't say if you should win. When you don't win, don't feel badly because you're still good players. I said, "Oh, thank you. I think you are very good too. We should. We're the last teams."
Didn't he ask you what you might do with the second place award?
Yeah, that's right. I'm just going to say that. He said, "Well, I hope you'll be happy with the second degree award." The second, not degree, the second award. Awards 2. Second award. So I said, "Well, thank you very much. I wish myself good luck too." Because he said, "I wish you good luck." So we sat down and we're playing a team game after game. We had to win by so many things. And when they got up and announced it, I just nearly died because they were sitting there so proud, you know. And they came and they said, "The Prince Takamatsu Cup goes to," and everybody's waiting to applaud, you know, and they're sitting back there, "goes to our team." I'm trying to think of what our team name was, but I can't right now, anyhow. And I'm telling you, they nearly died. And I went over to them and I said, good luck. I'm sorry that you didn't know who played that hand. And was the man that was fresh, during the team. Oh, and they brought the Takamatsu cup down and bowed at our table, and I still have a copy of it. They gave the 4 of us each a copy, and they're going to print our names in it, so I have my copy. And, well, they nearly died. And I wasn't very nice, because I went up and said, what are you going to do with second prize?
Yeah. Well, as I heard the story originally, he's going to ask you, what do you think you will do with your second place prize? And you came back afterwards and said, I finally found out or thought what I will do with the second place prize. I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Now, how about, okay, of course you went back to the States, and later on you went to Korea. So the last part of this interview, let's talk about your experience in Korea, how you met the wife of the President of the United States, and how you met the President, flew to the White House with him, and your work with the 3,000 children that you helped, and of course all the honorary degrees, doctorate degrees in Korea. Tell us about your experience in Korea only, just how you want to tell it, and that's the end of the interview.
Oh. We were in Seoul a short time, and one day I saw this Korean man with a Korean child on his shoulders, and he was carrying her, and I happened to know him, and I stopped him and said to him, what happened? No. He had taken the girl, and I saw him. And on his way back, I asked him, what was wrong with that little girl? He said, that's my daughter. I was taking her to school. I said, why on your shoulders? And what was that black thing around her mouth? He said, well, she has a heart problem. And that's what made that. She was very cyanotic. And so I said, well, don't you go to the doctors? He said, there's no doctor in Korea that does heart surgery at this time, and she needs a valve or something in her heart. And the doctor said she won't live very long. Oh, I couldn't believe it. And that night, they had something going on at the church, and I went to it, and usually I was involved a little bit, not a lot, but at the end of what we were having that night, the preacher looked at me and he said, what was the matter with you? You were so involved, and you didn't return the papers you were going to get for me. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. And I told him about this child. He said, that's why you weren't paying any attention? I said, yes. He said, listen, I'd like to hear about it, so how about having lunch tomorrow? Okay. So I met him, and he said, I know a doctor in Michigan that helped many children. I said, look, these children have no money. I don't know how they're going to go there and who's going to pay for it or anything. I said, I know somebody with the Korean Airlines. I know him. And I said, just, casually, and he could, maybe I could talk a ticket out of him for the child, if we could send the child or something. He said, well, the family can't afford. He's one of the cooks at the golf club, when I told him the name. So he said, I'll give you Mr. Michigan, his name just came, Doctor, I'll think of him because I know him very well. Anyhow, I'll give you his name, his address, telephone number, and you can use my name that's who you got it from. So I did, and I got the information on the child, and airlines. I knew the man in charge of the airlines. Isn't that terrible?
The names aren't as important as the general idea of what was going on.
A Korean, KAL, Korean Airlines, and I knew the head man there. So I went to him and asked him if he would donate the plane ticket. But he said you have to have an escort. You can't send the child alone on the plane, and to make sure that they're going to the place where, well, it happened, Michigan was famous and everything. And I said, well, how much would the ticket be? He said, you have to have an escort. Well, anyhow, I went to a school that taught English, and I asked them if they had somebody that spoke English well enough. And by the time I went to them and I got the free ticket from KAL, and then I went to a college that Carol donated time to and energy. In fact, there's a statue right there of my husband at this college that were the ones that made the deal and helped me a lot with the program. And
so you got the child and an escort.
Yeah, so we got the child. Now I have to find a donation. So I went to her, I went to her because they're the ones that my husband helped her school get started. Now I have to think of how I got, oh yes, she had a friend and that was going to Michigan. She didn't know if it's the same airport. I said, that wouldn't matter. I have somebody that's going to help me about the meeting. So she said, yes, I'll get you one that speaks English. So she went ahead and got the girl. The woman now is in a hospital here working as a first-class nurse, and is married to an American and is American citizen now. Because once she got on that thing, she loved it, and she donated time all the time. And so after it was all set up and the hospital agreed, but after the hospital agreed, they only keep the child till the child's had surgery. The surgery is okay. Then they have to be taken out because they're doing the surgery free. The doctor's time and everything. But the hospital will not give, till the child is well, free hospital care. So I had to find a family. Well, I went back practically in a nervous wreck to this man that introduced me to the people in Michigan and asked me. I told him the story. I had everybody and everything set up. He said, I said, can you think of something? He said, have lunch with me tomorrow again. Okay. So I did. He said, I have somebody. It's a cousin of mine, and she's always wanting to help something or somebody. She belongs to some kind of a club. But she said she will take the child not longer than 2 weeks, but she will take up to that time. Well, when I called back the hospital, they said 2 weeks was fine, was enough. They were sure. I said, if they aren't, you have to promise me you'll take her back until I find somebody. Okay, they'll do that. That's how the program got started. I need the help of everybody, you know. Then after a while, I still have this special pass at the American Embassy where I get fast service for visas, and on the airlines I get for the children. If somebody has to move, the children will come. Of course, after that, the hospitals I went crazy. I couldn't believe it. And then I had to find more hospitals in every state. And then I started sending them newspaper clippings. Because if I got a hospital to accept right away, I'd ask the Korean newspapers to make that hospital, you know, to say nice things. So it took a lot of people.
But how did the program start from that one child to 3,000 later? How did it start after that one child? That's only one child. What created the other children to
Well,
come?
you know, there was a lot of publicity of her leaving to go to America to get free surgery to save her life. You know, they made some publicity. And especially when she came back, people were waiting at the airport to see her. And then after all the publicities, the doctors got publicity, the airlines got publicity, and then organizations. The university there collected money for my program by saying that they would put it in the newspapers about them, and the students were helping. And
Students in Korea?
I went crazy.
Students in Korea or students in America? Where was all this publicity happening? In the United States or in Korea?
Oh, in Korea, to get the free plane tickets and the free escorts.
So how did the second and third people, how did that happen from the first child? You know, publicity, how did they start showing up?
Who, the children?
Yes.
At my door.
That's my point. How did you then get to meet Mrs. Reagan, the president's wife?
Well, there was some publicity about it a little bit, you know. I mean, in America they'd read it. Anyhow, the White House called me, and somebody called and said, this is the White House calling. And I said, this is the Blue House answering. I thought it was somebody being smart, you know. And it was Nancy Reagan. And she asked me some questions. And I told her, you know, that I had about the child to go and everything. And she said, we're coming to such and such a date to Korea. I said, oh my gosh, that's my birthday. Fine, I'll be there to meet you. And we had an appointment. And so when I was waiting for her at the American Embassy, she walked through the door. She came over and she put her arm around me. She said, happy birthday, and handed me, where is that bowl? Oh,
up there.
That bowl up there that's got written on the bottom, happy birthday, Nancy Reagan. You know, they're from Nancy Reagan.
You want me to hold it?
You want to see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to hold it?
That's it.
Do you want to see?
Yeah, that's it. And it's written on the... Oh, that was from Korea, that thing.
Mm-hmm.
That piece. And it's written on there, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. And that is from President Reagan. You know, after that, I rode on Air Force One many times.
Well, tell the story about, okay, you met Nancy Reagan, and then how did you come to the United States in Air Force One?
Because the child and I, when they came over there, she was so nice to me and so friendly. And so when they left, they said to us, see, I didn't know for sure that this was going to happen, that I would go back with Nancy Reagan and the child, but they needed an escort. See, they had to take, and the child wanted to hold me, wanted to, so you had to get the child a little bit used to the person. Some people offered to take the child, but they had to be so that they really, cared, because I always had to have an escort that was bilingual, that was going to the stop. That's why so many times I rode, and I was invited to many parties.
Okay, but we're still talking about Air Force and Nancy Reagan. You want to finish that story?
And we had our own when you get on the plane, they have offices after offices. And then in the back, we had, we were assigned a space, and it went into beds, also. And Nancy Reagan, the president, came in and said, "This is Harriet Hodges. She's the," wait a minute, what did he say? She's the, I don't know, something from, the Queen of Hearts. And they wanted to know, who is the Queen of Hearts? I said, I'm just accompanying children that will be going to the United States for heart surgery. But anyhow, Nancy says, anything she wants, you will give her in the middle, all day and all night, at any time with her and the children. And if you need help, you can come, just send somebody to get us. And he was nice, anyhow, all night. You want something to drink, this and that. And of course, when we landed in Alaska, they had pumpkins out and this and that and all sorts of stuff and entertainment, and clapping their hands. And then afterwards, same thing in America when we landed, of course. And they all had something special out. And they wanted, I never forget when I was with another child, 2 children, how they got up and sang a song and things. Anyhow, Nancy Reagan was wonderful. Do you know that she even had tickets sent to me to go to a party in California that they were having, that somebody was.
So you're on Air Force One and you land at Andrews Air Force Base. We're still in that story. So you land at Andrews Air Force Base, and you rode in a helicopter with the president to the White House. You want to tell that part of the story?
You mean the one about the...
When you were on Air Force One, and you landed at Andrews Air Force Base. What happened then?
Well, after that, the people came out and invited us inside, naturally, to come into the White House after he made his speech.
How did you get to the White House from Air Force One? You flew in a helicopter, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, and why don't you tell me the story you've always told me about having lunch with the President and Mrs. Reagan. What happened? You asking for his favorite picture. Remember that?
Oh, well, that's right then. We went, after we got off Air Force One, they took us inside and they asked us to please tell what they would, the maids and things, what would you like to drink? Or, you know, do you prefer this or that? And I said, I would like the favorite picture of President Reagan.
As I heard the story, President Reagan asked you, what picture did you want?
No.
Oh, okay.
He didn't, he just, no, that was of the children if I wanted some pictures of. No, I asked the maid when she was serving things around, what would you like to have? And I said, I'd love to have a picture of President Reagan. That's in his, one of his favorite pictures. That's what So she said, okay. Anyhow, she went out and she brought in assorted cookies and sandwiches, and she came over to me and she said, here is a picture for you. And I opened it and she said, oh, his favorite picture. And I opened it and it was him in his like blue jeans, like he casual, because he loved to go horseback riding. Is that what you were talking?
Yeah, that was interesting.
And that was the end of that day, but I was invited to at least 6 to 10 parties, anywhere in between, to President Reagan took.
And this publicity, of course, helped you publicize your program back in Korea. Of course, the
publicity. Well, not only that, I got free plane tickets all the time.
So you were able to bring the children?
People couldn't. Like, I went out to pick up one boy and I had to walk over 3 miles to pick up this child. Of course, I had a driver and everything, but I didn't know I had to walk that because the men sold dogs. They eat dog food. And that's all he had. And his little boy, his picture was on the cover of the book that they issued. In my 97 years of life were the time with other people and my experience with them. Especially, I think, not what I did, but what happened during my life that filled it. Especially the time spent with the program that I started and managing, helping people live a healthy life with children that could not have surgery that saved their lives, with people that help bringing many hours and time to survive a normal life. I thank God every day for my good health, that I have endured for 97 years. I am still able to think, feel, and act in many, many ways. To feel I'm still alive and want to do things that make others feel the way I do.